Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. Today, I have on Thomas Westbrook, also known as Holy Koolaid here on YouTube. All of his channel links and everything will be down in the description below. So yeah, thank you for joining me today, Thomas.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Um, First off, tell me a little bit about yourself and what exactly you do.
Well, I am a full-time secular activist. I started a company called Holy Koolaid LLC. It's a anti-cult educational organization. And I also am a science educator. I have a podcast called The Here and How, where we dive into big ideas and topics and try to uncover the history of how we got here and use what we learned to help us create a brighter future for everyone. So that's most of what I do. I've also helped organize conferences and um, currently in the process of writing a book and stuff, but those are my two main focuses, at least right now.
Okay. Next question. Were you religious before you became an atheist? And if so, what religion/denomination were you?
It's kind of a hard thing to pinpoint exactly what my religious denomination was, because my family was very multi-denominational, if that makes sense. Like, we
Yeah.
traveled a lot, and my parents did missions work, so I was in the church literally every single Sunday. I went to youth group. I was a youth camp counselor when I was in college. I did was a worship leader, a youth pastor, and then even became a missionary briefly myself. But I'd probably say the closest denomination would be evangelical. You know, we believed in all the supernatural stuff. We believed in healing, and my parents spoke in tongues. I never really got there because whenever I tried it, I just felt like I was lying, but just spouting gobbledygook. I mean, I could try it. I could just, be like, oh, but it's
Yeah.
no different to me than baby talk.
Yeah. I never understood the whole talking in tongues thing, honestly. What made you become an atheist, or what led to your path to becoming an atheist?
It was definitely a gradual thing. I think for some people, they're able to pinpoint one exact moment where they're like, that's when it happened. I had this, someone said something and it clicked, and I just realized instantly there is no God. But most people I've talked to, that's not the case. And with me, it wasn't the case either. For me, I found little breadcrumbs that led me down a path where I started, hearing things that didn't match up with my beliefs. But I was emotionally closed off to them. And then I would have someone in my life, like a youth pastor, told me that you can believe in evolution, and I believe in evolution, but I think that's the method that God used. And so then I was like a little bit more open to the concept of an older Earth, and to science maybe having some answers. And then I had another friend when I was working as a church camp counselor. He was a co-counselor of mine. And he told me that truth withstands scrutiny. So we don't need to be afraid to scrutinize anything, because if it's true, it's going to remain being true no matter how much you scrutinize it. And if it's not true, then, well, why believe in it? And so I figured, since the Bible has to be true, then it'll withstand any scrutiny you throw at it. So that kind of opened me up a little bit more to question and to be curious and open-minded. And as I dug deeper into it, I started seeing things that didn't quite match with my belief. Things that, um, questions like, what was the first human? And when I started realizing that there was no first human, because evolution is a very, very, it's not a linear thing. For one thing, it's branching off in all directions, but also it's a gradient. You could maybe look at a few hundred generations and say, okay, they were human, and anything outside or before that wasn't. But it's impossible really to pinpoint one specific point. It's like looking at a rainbow spectrum and saying, like, at what point does something, stop being red and becomes orange? It's impossible to do. There's kind of a
Yeah.
narrow little range that you can look at and say, well, this is more red and this is more orange, but you can't, really cut it like that. It doesn't work. And so for me, as I started, realizing, wait, if there's no first human, then that means that there was no Adam and Eve, and that wouldn't work anyways, because then, they'd just be incestuously reproducing, or all their kids would be incestuously reproducing, and the genetic bottleneck would be way too tiny, and we'd all have all kinds of diseases that result from being, that having that tiny of a gene pool. And, so you start seeing things like this, and then the story of Noah's Ark starts falling apart. And so you start having to resort to a position of it's not all literal. It's not, the Ken Ham interpretation of the Bible is probably not the actual way that things went down. And then once you start, tearing that apart, you realize that if that's not literal, well, then did Christ die for an allegory? Did he die for, something that's not, a literal story? Well, then was the story of Jesus not literal? And if that's the case, well, is God literal? Is it just some weird deistic God? Or is it actually, is there something more to it? And the more that I peeled back the layers of the onion, I started to realize that a lot of the stuff I'd been brought up with wasn't true, which makes you question even more, not less. And that kind of led me to where I am now, where I think that it's not only wrong, but I started realizing some of the damage that's caused, especially by the more literalists, by the more fundamentalists of the faith. And that's why oftentimes on my channel, I target fundamentalism and I target the literalists, and people say it's like low-hanging fruit, but it's because that's where most of the damage is being done. It's not by the, super liberal Christian that's, says, oh, well, God is just love and he's some amorphous, weird, notion. And we don't take the Bible literally. We believe in science. Well, that's not the damaging kind of Christian. And so that's normally not what I go after.
Yeah. Just to make sure, I just thought of one, but just to make sure you did say you do classify yourself as a science communicator, right?
Yeah, I do. Okay. I don't think that you have to. There's kind of a fine line, because I would say I am a science communicator, but as a layman, because I'm learning a lot of this stuff. I've been passionate. I've been an enthusiast for a long time. I'm not a lab technician. I'm not a PhD. I don't have, a huge amount of like field work under my belt, but I do know how to read a lot of the scientific literature. I know how to tell a good journal from a bad one. I know how to, suss out bullshit on the internet and expose it. And so, I mean, these are skills that I think everyone should have. I think they're skills that we should all have been equipped with when we left high school. Unfortunately, many of us haven't been. And so I kind of take it upon myself, because I'm a decent communicator and, I know a thing or two about science. Then I'm like, I'm going to share what I learn at least. And if I get something wrong, I'm and to correct, myself along the way. But, it's about learning. It's about being open and curious and inquisitive and, sharing as you go.
Yeah, and I fully agree with you. They need to teach that in science classes of how to do all that. But the reason I was asking, just to make sure, I was going to ask, what's your favorite, I guess, subject of science to try and communicate and talk about?
My favorite would probably be neuroscience and psychology, but specifically, when you start looking at how the brain works and you start breaking it down and realizing like which regions account for what, and then you start realizing when certain regions are damaged, what functions are lost. And why I kind of couple psychology in with that is because I love studying various cognitive biases and self-delusions, which most of us have, even if we have perfectly intact, healthy, functioning brains. That's more the realm of psychology. But there are a lot of these delusions and stuff that can occur from neurological, stemming from neurological sources. That would probably be my favorite field. But I'm very passionate about astrophysics and about evolutionary biology and chemical evolution and abiogenesis. So I know those are wildly different fields with not a whole ton of overlap, but I think maybe one of the reasons why I pick those fields is because those are areas where, having been raised extremely religious, those are areas where there are very few astrophysicists who are religious. There are who are, at least fundamentalist, literalist creationists, and there are also very few evolutionary biologists and very few neuroscientists. And it's because in those fields you start to realize, one, how easily all of us are deceived and how easily our minds play tricks on us. And so you start to kind of see the origins of religion and religious thinking there. And two, like evolutionary biology, is you start to realize like where it all came from and how it got here and what we're made of. And you look at like chemical evolution and abiogenesis, you start realizing that we have a lot of the pieces to the puzzle, and we have enough to get a pretty big view of like what the overall picture is. And you can't see that overall picture and have all those pieces and have all that information and step back and be like, oh yeah, therefore it must be God. And the same with astrophysics as well. So those three fields I find fascinating, and I dive into other disciplines as well. I study, history a little bit. I study, I got a degree in international studies and political science. And so, I love politics, but it's not really the focus of my channel. It's
Yeah.
like the one thing I actually am an expert in is the one thing that I don't comment on too much.
Yeah. What you were talking about with the easily deceived, I don't remember who it was, but there was a magician, like a magician and an illusionist, and he says, I'm thankful that the human mind is easy to trick, because if it wasn't, I'd be out of a job.
Yeah.
I don't remember who it was that said that, but it just made me think of that.
Yeah.
And I had a little problem where you went to college. Well, not so much anymore, but back in the day I did. Because you went to A&M, right? Texas A&M?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a Jayhawk fan.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, sports-wise, yeah. But the next question on my list is, do you classify yourself as an anti-theist, and what does the quote-unquote label anti-theist, what does that mean to you?
This one's tricky because I don't like the term anti-theist because it conveys that you are opposed to the person, the theist. I think anti-theism is extremely important. I think that we should be opposed to dangerous ideologies and literalist ideologies, especially. But anything that basically puts forth or touts faith rather than doubt as a good way to know things, like the basis of the scientific method is doubt. You take something, you question it. Is this true? How can we know that it's true? Is it falsifiable? Well, let's test it and try to prove it wrong. Whereas faith, on the other hand, says, this is what we should believe in, regardless of what the evidence points to. And so I think that kind of thinking is very dangerous and very backwards, and it has a tendency to get us stuck in all kinds of quagmires. I'm opposed to that. I'm opposed to ideologies that don't put humans first, but that glorify suffering as some type of goal to have greater rewards in the hereafter. I think that this life is worth fighting for and making, this life better. And so when I say that I'm an anti-theist, I'm really opposed to the ideology. I don't like the word anti-theist, though, because, so many of my friends and family members are still religious and I love them to death. Most of them are pretty liberal and laid back, and I'm not their enemy. And I don't want it to seem like I'm going after them, because like I said, I'm attacking bad ideologies. And as soon as you start just attacking the people and saying that they're stupid and that they're idiots, well, then you're going after the man and not the ball. And you start descending closer into the realm of ad hominem attacks. And I was once religious. I don't think that my IQ had this massive bump the second I became non-religious. I think it opened me up to question things I hadn't before. But for that reason, I tend to avoid the word anti-theist, but I probably would classify myself as one, if that is
that
winded way of putting it.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I actually, as you're going, I'm like, yeah, that actually makes sense with the anti-theist. Someone might take it as being against the argument, whereas the way I view it is anti-theist is just someone who views religion does more harm than good overall. And that's because I've asked several people, I've gotten, a couple of different responses, like just wondering what your take on that word was.
In that case, you can have theists who are anti-theists.
Yeah.
People can believe that God exists and believe in the religion and still think that it's done more harm than good.
Yeah. That does make sense.
It's just like you can have atheists who wish that it wasn't that God was real. And I've talked to atheists like this. You say, you know what? I can't believe it. There's no evidence, but I really sure do wish that there was a God. You have people all along the spectrum. You have people that say like, oh, I'm an apatheist. I just don't give a shit. And it's like, okay, well, that works too.
Yeah.
I don't see how you couldn't, care about something that's so, such a big question. But
yeah, I don't think I've ever run into one like that. I'll have to try and keep an eye out for one. I think that would be an interesting talk.
Oh, I've certainly talked to a few people like that.
Um, my next question is, what was your favorite video you have made and why?
Ah, that's really hard. Hmm. So I really liked. I did a video called, I think, what was it, like location is an illusion, or what religious people don't seem to understand about like space or location. I forget the title I put for it, but it's basically kind of talking about how, you know, the notion of a holy land is absolutely absurd, because we're literally living in a cosmic soup. The you know We're flying through the Milky Way at a staggering speed that is completely arbitrary. Like, your velocity is completely arbitrary. It's relative to other points in space. You
Yeah,
have this gigantic cosmos that, like, if there's a god out there, why would he care about one tiny, tiny, microscopic little speck? And yet we're flying around our sun. We're flying. Our Earth has orbital velocity. It's spinning, and at the same time you have the tectonic plates on our planet that are shifting around and like moving stuff around. You have strong winds that are blowing away topsoil. You have water that's carving out valleys and canyons and eroding shorelines. You have trees popping up and you know that and tearing the ground apart. You have them dying and eroding. All of this stuff is happening in this planetary soup. And and yet you have creationists that'll come along and be like, this tiny little sliver in time and space, this tiny little location, like this is a holy land. And it's just bullshit. It's like, even the buildings, you come back to a booming city like 100 years later, and it's all new materials built, shipped in from international locations that are being broken down and becoming part of the soil and stuff. And you have things that are eroding in garbage and compost, and you have volcanoes and stuff. It's all changing. And to look at something like that and be like, well, God, who's like fixed and eternal and omniscient and all powerful, and he's gonna choose like this one tiny little region of the desert as like his favorite little chunk of dirt. It's like, why would God settle on a couple of acres when he's got the whole fucking cosmos?
yeah,
And yet this is an idea that has led to so many wars, from the Crusades to the Yom Kippur War to all the current madness that's going on with the
God,
West Bank and Gaza and Jerusalem and whatnot. You have all these people taking pilgrimages to Mecca. You've got the Ganges River. And for people to think of this as a sacred place, it's literally as absurd as saying that Zeus lives on top of the gods fighting it out and stuff. It's very anthropomorphic in our view of God, and it's a very tiny. It's a very, very tiny way to view the cosmos.
yeah.
But
Uh,
we're tiny humans with tiny perspectives, and I think it's about time that we grow up and stop thinking like that.
yeah, I was gonna reference something that Brian Stevens said. They said the Holy Land where wars rule, and that's probably one of the most accurate descriptions I've heard of it.
Yeah.
And
It's like
then
how much blood has to get drenched into soil before it's we grow up and realize that the land isn't sacred, that maybe the human life is more valuable than the dirt that it resides in.
yeah, yeah, and the obviously the flip side of that question is, what is your least favorite video you've made?
Uh
I know
my
everybody's their
least
own critic.
favorite one, uh there was one, I forget what it was, but the Thanksgiving one was shit. I put out a video on Thanksgiving, like why we should or no, it wasn't Thanksgiving. I think it was on like why we should forgive as an atheist. And someone had sent me a video, and it was kind of a response to that, like, why should you forgive people? And I mean, the points that I made, I think, were okay, but I think I could have done a much better job. I think that I could have, you know, worded things better. I think that there were some other arguments that I could have laid forth, that, the case for forgiveness. And I think I do believe that that's something that we often overlook as atheists, that, you know, if there's one thing that I value about my religious upbringing, it was this notion that like everyone deserves a second chance. And that, my parents really embedded this belief in me that you can't judge someone until you walk a mile in their shoes. And even still, it's not really your place to judge. And so, like, you should try to empathize with people, try to understand them, try to realize where they're coming from. And when you couple that with this, more deterministic view of the cosmos, and you start to realize that we don't really have free will in the sense that we've thought of it, that, all of this, if you were to go back to the very beginning of time and set off the Big Bang exactly the same way, well, you'd probably make the same choices that you made all the way up until right now, because all the same influences would be there, all the same, physical aspects would be there that cause you to, maybe you're a little bit grumpy because you haven't had anything to eat that day, or because, there was too much lead or not enough zinc or something like in the atmosphere, or like there's all these tiny little things, as well as like things that other people do to you, that they're reacting to their environment and the people around them are reacting to their environment. So like you start to realize that, like, maybe we should be a little more compassionate in how we approach people, because you start to understand where they're coming from. You start to realize why they're doing the things that they're doing. Does it justify horrible, horrific actions? No, but it makes you want to help people in need and help people who are hurting, and you start to see them as people too. And I talk to a lot of atheists who don't have that compassionate type of mindset, who are very just, well, fuck them and like just kill them all, like, or not kill them, like I don't really hear that a lot, but I'll just be like, religious people are all shit, or anyone who's hurt me, like they don't deserve any kind of forgiveness. There's oftentimes bitterness or anger, and I don't want to live under that cloud. I don't want to live under this cloud of hatred and resentment. I want to be free from that and just let it off my shoulders. That doesn't mean that you have to be a sucker for life, fool me once, shame on you, but fool me twice. What was it that George Bush said? I'm obviously kidding, but I don't think that we should have to, be gullible or suckers, or keep falling for the same cons. We remember, we don't forgive and forget. We don't put ourselves in situations where someone who has treated us like garbage can continue to. That's why we leave abusive relationships. That's, I left an emotionally abusive marriage, but at the same time, like I don't hold that over my ex-wife. Like, I'm not bitter towards her. I'm not angry towards her. I've completely forgiven her and moved forward, because I don't want to spend the rest of my life in resentment. I don't want to spend the rest of my life in anger. I just, letting go of that and moving on and trying to understand and empathize with people, even if you separate yourself from a situation, I think is valuable. And so while I think that video, it had so much potential to be something more powerful and to really make a statement, I don't think I did the topic justice, and I felt, like I did a shit job. But that's my least favorite video, to answer your question.
That's fine. That, and I feel for you, having gone through a emotionally abusive relationship, and I admire you being able to forgive, because there's times that I had someone cheat on me and it put me in a really bad area, and there's still times I kind of hold that resentment still, and I'm still trying to learn to let it go, and that was 3 years ago.
It's not as I don't want to, for even a fraction of a second, to make people feel like I'm not acknowledging their pain, or that I don't understand that sometimes it is the most difficult thing in the world. I also realize sometimes it's damn near impossible. Like, it can be really hard. It's not easy. Yeah. But is it worth it? I think it is. I think that it's a goal we should all aspire to, is to, to not live in a world of resentment and anger and bitterness and holding grudges, but to try to move forward. And, so I don't want to downplay anyone's pain. I don't want to downplay anything that people are struggling with. At the same time, I think it's extremely liberating to be able to let go sometimes.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I know with me personally, it's I've gotten to the point where it's in the past, it's done and over with, and I've kind of moved on from it. There's still those days that it's just, I kind of sit back on and go, why did you? That's what I mean by I still have a little bit of resentment still, and it's not an easy thing to get over. But the next question.
Well, can I say one last thing on that? Is people don't realize this very often, but when you don't forgive someone And when you're resentful and you drudge it up and you remember it and you dwell on it and you know, just stew over these feelings, oftentimes there are negative repercussions for you. And so even if the person who hurt you is a complete piece of shit, even if they've, you know, they don't deserve a second chance, they don't deserve to be in your life, they've hurt you and they're garbage. Even if that's 100% the case, by holding on to it, you're hurting yourself, because let's say that down the road that you have a relationship with someone who is wonderful and loving and perfect and faithful and cares about you, and you're still clinging on to and holding on to this past issue, then a lot of that baggage is going to overflow onto the other people that you're in contact with. It's going to hurt your friendships and your relationships with people that you're in contact with now. And so you're not really forgiving, you know, just for, you're not doing it for the sake of the people who've hurt you. You're doing it for your own sake and for the sake of people who you know you care about, who you're friends with. So
Yeah, and I'm in full agreement with you, because I know that just like when it happened to me, I know that like for like a couple months, I was just, I mean, I was one of the nastiest people to be around. I was no fun at all. So I do know that, and I do fully agree with you. But yeah, that kind of went in a different direction than I was planning.
I know I cracked open the bottle of feels on you.
Yeah. But hey, I'm very happy you did, and that. But my next question is, what is your favorite thing to debunk and why? Like to go through and go psychics.
Definitely psychics.
Okay, why?
I've got a whole series right now on psychics, and it's so fun because on the one hand, like they do a lot of harm. There's so much damage, and like I have a video in the pipeline about like what's the harm, and you know, honestly, it's, when someone asks me that, like it pisses me off, because it's like there's a huge amount of harm. Like, if you know, what's the harm in preying on someone who's emotionally vulnerable at their lowest state and grieving, and preying on them, asking for money, not giving them closure, but telling them that, hey, your dead relative is still around and I can talk to them, telling someone that, hey, your dead husband is, you know, he's waiting for you on the other side and he's just waiting for you to be with him. And then you have people who go and commit suicide to bring that about. What's the harm? What's the harm in psychic healing and people who have, you know, that they go to these psychic healers who they believe can just wave their hands over them and cure them of diseases, and then they come home to die because they haven't sought out any kind of actual medical treatment? You know, there's so much harm that it's not just that, but it's holding us back ideologically. It's preventing us from, you know, really focusing on the science, because you have people who just denigrate scientific skepticism and say like, oh, you know, it's true, it doesn't, your truth doesn't apply to me. And it's like, that's bullshit. Like, that's demonstrable bullshit. And rather than us focusing on like, okay, we've debunked all that stuff, let's move forward and not give people entire TV shows, not give people, you know, hours and hours of media time, but actually, you know, focus on scientific progress and futurism and discovery and the future, and, you know, dedicate our time and our research dollars where it will count and where it will make a difference. And it's like we can only move as fast as our slowest players. And if we have so many people that are still dragging their feet and keeping us in the dark ages, then, you know, it's crazy to come along and just point to that as something that's just, you know, harmless. Why I have the most fun making the videos, though, is because there are so many instances of just the most ridiculous claims, and finding ways, like creative ways to debunk it, is just, there's no end to it. And I'm doing a video, hopefully it'll be out by this Saturday, I'm working on it right now, on telekinesis and people who think that they can move objects with their mind and stuff. And like, there's some amazing things that just hilarious fails. Like the cringe fails are the best. Like I did 2 videos that were just like psychic cringe fail predictions, where they're predicting these horrible things or making these statements that are just instantly like debunked, and it's hilarious.
Yeah, but I'm just going to take a wild shot in the dark here and say you don't really have very fond feelings of psychics, do you? I can't quite tell from your answer.
I don't what?
you don't have fond feelings of psychics. I couldn't tell from how you responded to the question.
Well, so I grew up in former Soviet Union in a Muslim country. And if you've ever been to either any like Soviet or former Soviet country, like any of the CIS states or Russia, or if you've ever been to the Muslim world, you'll know that there is a ridiculous amount of woo. And that, you know, you'll go out on the street and there'll literally be fortune tellers on the street selling you fortunes. And sometimes they'll have like birds that will like pull a little like fortune from a hat that's like specifically for you, or there'll be palm readers or stuff like that. But it is insane how many people bought into it over there. And they would go and buy curses to place on someone that they didn't like, or they would go for like protection from someone, or they'd wear charms or have like these little good luck charms or something to protect against the evil eye. And it's absolutely insane. And it's not because the literacy rates are low. Like if most Soviet countries have like 99%, or former Soviet countries have like 99% literacy rates, these are insane, like insanely high. Like that was one thing that they actually really focused on was, you know, people should know how to read and write. But it's not just knowing how to read. It goes beyond literacy. It goes to a whole nother level of education. And that's like scientific education. And like, how does the scientific method work? How can we debunk, you know, all this crap? How can we separate fact and fiction from truth and reality? And there's just a misunderstanding as to the nature of reality, the nature of the world, and how this stuff works. And part of it is because the stuff that's the most sensational, the craziest, the most far out there, and that's usually BS, gets the most attention. It gets the most media. It gets the most attention in like newspapers and on TV shows and all over the place. So you'll see these shows that are just taking it and running wild with it. And it doesn't help in the Muslim world that a lot of this stuff is, you know, put forth from, you know, religious leaders as, you know, oh yeah, this happens and it's, you know, satanic or it's the devil or something. And so like they believe it, they buy into it, they think it all exists. I used to when I was religious, and I just thought that it was demons that were responsible for the fortunes, because even in the Bible you have, you know, a fortune teller that, you know, King Saul goes to summon the ghost of Samuel in order to, you know, hear if he's going to win a battle or something. And it's complete fairy tales. It's crap. Yeah. But you have this widespread belief in it. So I had that growing up. I saw a lot of it. And then I come back to the States and I realized that there's entire TV shows like the Long Island Medium, and now you have like the Hollywood Medium, and you have Jonathan Edwards and stuff, and they're getting all this exposure and watch time, and they're not even good. Like they're not even good at what they're doing. They have good editors who will take like the best bits of their shows and showcase them. They'll have people, you know, gathering information out in the lobby. They'll have, you know, cards that people fill out ahead of time. Yeah. They have all this research and stuff, and then they still get it wrong. They still, you know, it's insane. But they're just making statistically high guesses, or they're doing a hot reading or a warm reading based off of information that they've already gathered on the person. Yeah. And yet people are buying it up. They're spending thousands of dollars, you know, on, or not usually one person, but sometimes people will spend like $600 for a 30-minute reading. Yeah, and it blows my mind.
Yeah. I never liked, because I always viewed them as they're playing off of people's emotions and things like that. And the thing is, most of the time, it's like they'll say something so vague, like I'm getting an A, a male A.
Yeah.
And they'll go, oh, that's my dad Arthur or whatever. I don't know, first name I can think of.
Well, and here's the thing too. Like this is one of the cold reading tricks that I expose. But like if let's say that you come into an audience where you have 200 people in a room, well, if you put forth a name like J or M, well, okay, first of all, most of the people who are there to see you are there because they've lost someone that they love, or several someone. So most of the people in the audience are like middle-aged or elderly. And so they're coming in because they've lost like a parent or a spouse or something like that, or a kid. And so you're already surrounded by an audience full of people who are thinking about people that they've lost. And then you're putting out the two most common initials, like a J and an M, like together, you know, I think J is like the most common guy's initial. You've got names like John, or they'll say like it's J sounding like a G, like George or something. You've got like, you know, Jeffrey and Jim and Jonathan and, all this stuff. And then you have M as like the most common girl's initial. You have names like Mary and Margaret and whatnot, that you put all of this together, and it's about 20% of the names like in existence are like J or G sound, like J sounding or M names. So they say, I'm getting a J or an M. Well, of course they would go for the two, statistically most likely ones. Like as soon as a psychic throws that out there, that they're full of shit, because that what they're doing is they're playing a statistics game. And so they'll say like, oh, I'm getting a J name or a J sounding name, or I'm getting an M name. They throw that out there. And I put together a compilation of so many different cases where psychics will go to those specific letters, but then they'll try to point at something that's more specific. They'll say like, I think, they died from pain in their chest. Okay, well, that seems specific, but you think about it, like most of your vital organs are in like your chest region. It's like, oh yeah, they had a heart attack. Well, that's the, heart failure or heart conditions or heart disease is like the #1 cause of death in America. Yeah. Okay, or they had, lung cancer or something like that. Well, so you have all this is like in your chest. Oh, chest pain. Well, no shit. So you've got already 200 people that have people that they've lost, loved ones that they've lost, and they'll say, oh, it's, I'm getting like someone who has like a J or an M sounding name. They died from pain in their chest. I feel like it was a father figure. Okay, well, father figure, that could be your uncle, that could be your dad, your adopted dad, your guardian, your granddad. Almost everyone has lost some type of father figure. And so then you take that in 200 people, well, you're almost guaranteed multiple hits in an audience that size when you're shotgunning it out and you're playing the odds game. Well, then you kind of read the person and you see like, okay, are they wearing a wedding ring? Are they married? Are they not married? Are they dressed like upper class, lower class? Are they poor? Are they, do they look like they're really sad, like that just happened? Like there's a lot of cues that you can get just by looking at someone. So then they can tune in and they just start hammering out question after question to the sitter, and they see they're watching the micro expressions on someone's faces. Are they slightly smiling? Are their eyes lighting up? Are they kind of shaking their head slightly? So you don't even have to say no for them to know instantly that they need to move to the next question, and then they get this instant hit. Well, that's what they're going to hone in on. So it's a bunch of trickery, but it's kind of disgusting that they're playing off of the most vulnerable people in society to do this. And it's disgusting that news organizations are giving them the time of day.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't like them either. I just have no love lost for psychics. But the next question is the other half of that. What is your least favorite thing to debunk and why?
Oh, the least favorite thing would probably be like there's certain apologetic arguments that are philosophical arguments that creationists use that are kind of their last go-to straw. So you'll hear, someone put forth, an argument that's just like, oh, well, how do you know that, when they start getting really vague about like reality or the definition of God or the definition of morality, and they start redefining their terms, then it's like, they shift the goalposts so far that I'm just like, I'm not even interested in having a conversation anymore. Yeah. I like philosophy. It's not practical. It's like if you want to put forth an idea of like a God that interacts with us, well, that's something we can test. We can actually do prayer studies and see like, is there a result? That's something we can gather empirical data over. Whereas if it's just like, oh, well, no, but God is more of a concept. Well, what the fuck is a concept? Like, how do you disprove a concept? It's like, there's a ghost and it talks to me. Okay, is this audible? No, it's only in my head. Okay, well, can we scan your brain and see if maybe you're hallucinating? Oh no, it's just the ghost is talking to me through hallucinations. When people start pushing stuff back to this untestable realm where skepticism can't even penetrate, then like that's an area where like I just won't go. Like you're wasting my time. You're not honestly trying to actually understand this. You're just trying to shift the goalpost to a point where you can't score.
Yeah, I understand that. It's really annoying when they go, because I've had them where they argue, well, God's outside of space and time, so he doesn't interact with us. And they go, oh, no, he does. I go, then he's not outside of space and time if he comes into space and time. But he does it from outside, and it's like, you're making no sense. And I've finally gotten fed up enough on that argument that if anyone ever uses it, I go, okay, you just admitted your God doesn't exist. Yeah. You just said your God exists at no place and at no time if he's outside space and time, therefore he cannot exist because he exists at no place and no time. And it's,
yeah. It's
I
like
finally had enough on that.
You can't have your cake and skull fuck it too.
Yeah. I've never heard it put quite like that before.
I should have asked you beforehand if it's okay if I swear on your channel.
I have no issue with swearing. Yeah,
because I don't in my videos, but I do in my live chat. So I'm kind of
you're fine. You're fine. Okay,
it's too hard to censor myself for an hour.
Yeah, you're fine. Yeah, here to show how good it is, how okay I am with swearing. God damn it, Christ on a cock fucking himself. Shit. There you go. I don't think you can get much worse than that.
I try to get creative with my swearing when I do, or like in my videos, I don't use swear words, but I find really creative ways to, or I try to find, at least I think they're creative. Most people probably don't, but I try to come up with creative ways to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Because I think oftentimes if I just resort to using the same swear words over and over again, it just portrays a lack of imagination and a limited vocabulary. And I think that there's ways that you can portray the same idea without being off-putting to people who might, possibly find swearing to be distasteful.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I understand that. I try not to, like I said, I think the worst I usually call arguments bullshit.
Yeah,
because I've been scripting mine out, so it does kind of limit. I can kind of catch right at like, oh no, I don't want to use that there. Yeah. But what made you want to start doing YouTube and making YouTube videos?
Well, I had probably initially, oh god, and this is gonna be bad. I'm blanking on his name, but there was a YouTuber way back in the day. Was it Freddie Wong? I think was his name. It's not atheist videos, but he just made special effects and like crazy stuff where he would get millions and millions of views, things like Call of Duty cat videos and stuff like that, but they were really, really well done. And he was like a film student, and he started kind of showing how anyone could make videos. And I was like, this is so cool. And then I started, as I watched more and more YouTube, I started seeing the YouTube community and how it really is this, all these video creators and creative people who are like making something, and like I wanted to be a part of that. And I'd worked on a couple of like tech startups, and I wanted to be a part of the startup world. But when I saw the chance to like make videos, especially as like I was diving into like science and these concepts related to atheism, and the atheist community was going through a bit of a slump, if you will, where content creators who used to make videos about atheism had stopped, and a lot of the ones who were still making videos had shifted to feminism and social justice. There was a bit of a void where I felt that religious people were running wild. And when Trump got elected to the presidency, I realized that this was a void that needed to be filled, because you had evangelicals being put into every position in office, and it was extremely premature of us to just be like, oh, hey, Aaron Ra and Thunderfoot made video series, therefore we won. No, there's a lot of work left to be done. And there are a lot of crazy positions being spit forth. And you have religious channels like Dennis PragerU, that's getting millions of views. You have, religious arguments coming from people like Jordan Peterson that just literally redefine terms left and right. And they're getting massive traction as like, oh, this is what Christianity is. Okay, it's not so bad. And it's giving a smokescreen for the rest of the religious insanity that's going on. And I think it needs to be called out. And so I joined in where I think there really weren't a lot of channels at that time that were still making videos, with a few exceptions. And right around that time, it wasn't just me. There were probably 10 or 15 other creators that joined at the same time as me. And as we started putting out videos, it got a lot of attention, and a lot of other smaller creators were like, hey, I can do that. You know what? Cosmic Skeptic's only 17 and he's making videos. I can make videos. Yeah. What? Holy Koolaid's just doing it on like a smartphone while he's traveling around like in, Southeast Asia. Well, what the hell? Like, I can make videos. I have a smartphone. And so you had all these people, and some of the videos, some of them are crap. Some of them, people don't have any editing skills, but they grow as they learn as they go, so they start off with videos that aren't that great, and then they learn and they ask other people and they get tips and they improve. And other people come along like Brilliant Doubt is a new content creator, and he's just like right out of the bat, he has amazing quality content. And I don't think that, a lot of these content creators have messaged me and others, kind of in our circle, and said, hey, you've really inspired me to start making videos. And so that this community has grown from just, a handful of us to, I think now, like over 60 or more content creators, probably 75 or 80 or 100 now, that are making regular videos that are passionate about this cause, that are, trying to educate and reignite this movement. And I think it's safe to say that we have more than a spark now.
Yeah. And before I get to the next question, I am going to plug him here because you did mention him. Brilliant Doubt. Anybody who is watching, if you have not subscribed to him, please do so. He is amazing. But yeah, the next question is,
can I say on that note, before we move forward, is one thing I love about this new community too, is that the last wave of atheist YouTubers, and I know that's such a very broad term, because you've got people on all ends of the spectrum, but it seemed like it ate itself. It was a lot of the creators put out great videos, but then they turned on each other. And this isn't everyone, but you have content creators that are much more toxic, that are a little bit more vitriolic and angry, and that some of them were, and I'm not going to name names here, but some of them would go out of their way to throw others under the bus in order to get more subs and to create drama, to create response videos, to get more attention. And to a large extent, it worked, but at what cost if the entire community is being divided over it? And it's not that the issues that they were talking about weren't important. It was the way that they were doing it and some of the methods that they used that I just felt really distasteful to me. And I don't see that with this new community. With this new community, I see everyone giving everyone else shout outs, doing collaborations, encouraging each other. And if you disagree with someone, like, they reach out to them. We all are on Twitter. We're like, it's not hard for us to reach out to each other and be like, hey, like, I disagree with this. You want to come on my channel and we'll talk about it. And we do. And it's not like we're, this cult that is all of one mindset. We say question everything. But if I've got a beef with you, like, I'm going to approach you. I'm not just going to air my dirty laundry on YouTube in front of the entire world and have you be completely blindsided by it. And now you're emotionally hostile to me and angry at me that you're going to come out and do a response video takedown of me. And then, there's just this drama back and forth. And I don't think that really helps anyone.
Oh! Now you bring up the laundry I want to air out. Yeah, you're the worst YouTuber ever. I don't even know. That's why I brought you on, was just to tell you that. No,
why am I here?
You are really awesome. You're really awesome. I do like you. But and speaking of yourself, this one is actually about you, and I actually put it in the channel one, but it was actually supposed to be on the about you section of it. But what is the story behind your name, Holy Koolaid, and why did you choose that name? Particularly, I mean, out of all the combinations you could have done, what was the reason behind that?
Well, so it kind of stems back to the Church of Scientology, where if any of you are familiar with Anonymous, the hacking group, there was a while back where there was this kind of battle that was going on back and forth between Anon and the Church of Scientology. And Anonymous, I think they leaked a video of one of the Scientology meetings where it was just absolutely some of the most insane shit. And the Church of Scientology went apeshit and got pissed off. I presented this thing where Anonymous basically declared war on the Church of Scientology. And this went so viral that you had people all around the world at the same day showing up in person for the first time. Communities on Reddit, 4chan, all over the web that were showing up outside of Scientology headquarters, wearing Guy Fawkes masks, holding signs and chanting, "Don't drink the Kool-Aid." And it was one of the most beautiful things, because here you had this church that has ruined so many people's lives, that is the epitome of a cult, that is dangerous, that is harmful, and that has gone up against organizations like the FBI and the IRS. And in some cases, like in the case of the IRS, they won their battle. They didn't initially have tax exempt status, and they just made the IRS's life a living hell until they consented. And so you have this extremely powerful organization that, like, how do they combat an organization that is headless, leaderless, just anonymous, dispersed throughout the internet, And so when I saw Anonymous taking on the Church of Scientology and chanting, "Don't drink the Kool-Aid," that was kind of the moment for me where I realized that, like, you know what? These religious organizations, they're powerful. In some cases, they're multi-billion-dollar organizations, and yet they're being taken down by Redditors and YouTubers and, you know, people on the internet who are exposing them for the crap that they are. And at that moment, that was kind of where I wanted to take this idea, and it stems back to Jim Jones, the cult at Jonestown, where, the phrase "don't drink the Kool-Aid" comes from. It wasn't actually Kool-Aid, it was Flavor Aid, but I don't care that people use the expression. And basically they laced this fruit drink with cyanide and killed like over 900 people in an afternoon. So I wanted to take this and show like religions are harmful, they're damaging. And so I took this idea of like Kool-Aid and I wanted to juxtapose it with, the Last Supper, and compare, the wine that Jesus hands out and says like, this is my body, or this is my blood, take it, drink it in remembrance of me, and compare that with Jonestown and with the, don't drink the Kool-Aid, and showing that like religions really aren't any different than cults, except in, sometimes with a cult, the leader's still alive.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know the anonymous part. I thought it just had I was wondering, like, how did James Jones tell you work into your team? That's where I thought it was originally from. I didn't know it had to do with anonymous. Okay, that's interesting.
Well, the inspiration, like that, I think that moment was kind of what clicked it for me to make that as like the title. But like I was fully aware of the Jonestown reference. I was fully aware of like the history of the phrase and the expression. And so I kind of took all of that and I was just like, what if I call it like Holy Kool-Aid? Like that's something that's memorable, that, it's short and sweet, and it instantly communicates what I'm about.
Yeah. That's an interesting story on that. My next question is, on your channel, you do interviews. Who is your favorite person that you have interviewed that you look back and you go, that's my favorite interview? That was the best person I had on.
James Randi.
Okay.
I say that because he's been a longtime hero of mine. And when I first met him, like I walked up to him and I was like, I don't really fanboy. And I've met Hugh Laurie, I've met Richard Dawkins, and I've met, some bigger name people, and just, I don't really fanboy. I just see people as people. But for me, James Randi, I definitely fanboyed. And I think part of it is because when I was still religious, I stumbled across his video, or he had a documentary on like the secrets of psychics. And that was where like I stopped believing in the paranormal. And shortly after, like I pretty much stopped believing in like demons around the same time. And that led me to like stop fearing hell. And, I saw there were other points, like there was a 43 Alley video and stuff, but like on hell not existing, that kind of helped me along that pathway. But I remember like the seed of skepticism was watching a James Randi video and going, holy shit, like this guy is really onto something. This guy really makes a lot of sense. Like he actually disproves it. He debunks it. Like there's something here. And so when I went up to him and I talked to him, I thought, I'd probably see him briefly and then he would just disappear and I wouldn't see him for the rest of the conference. But he was there like the whole weekend. I was like, can I interview you? Took him aside, sat down with him for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, just like talking to one of my like lifetime heroes. And the guy's a legend, not just in terms of debunking stuff. Like you look at his work in magic and stuff, and it's insane how much he's accomplished. And that was my favorite interview. Definitely the biggest interview or person that I've interviewed. Some of the most fun that I've had in an interview was I just did a live stream with Cosmic Skeptic, Rationality Rules, and Rachel Oates, and it was just like me and the three British, what do we call them, like the British trifecta of atheists, and we just kind of kicked back and joked and played a game on the stream. I think we played like Never Have I Ever while drinking or something, and it was just a fun stream.
Fun. That sounds fun. Right now, if you did not make a channel, you never found the YouTube community, what do you see yourself doing?
I would probably either be involved in some type of tech startup or some form of like national security. because I got my degree in international studies and Russian. I spoke a couple critical languages, and I wanted to do something with like the State Department or with the government. I was actually applying for the U.S. Navy to work in like naval intelligence, and that fell through because it was at the time that I applied, they were the surge had happened like 4 years before, and I think this was around 2013. They were doing all of their cutbacks, and like all the military officers were losing their commissions. They weren't, a lot of people weren't invited to reapply. And so when I applied to commission in the Navy, they basically said like, we don't have any spots.
Yeah.
And so, but I think that if I wasn't involved in YouTube, I probably would have gone for that again. I've thought about getting into national security. I've thought about getting back into IT. Those are two things I actually do at some point want to do with my life. I'd love to go into politics too. But right now there's so much stuff that I need to address first. I just think that like this life is way too short, man. Like there's so many things that I want to get done.
Yeah.
And I just don't have enough time. And I think all of those things, like they're extremely useful tools to get, the experience that I need to be able to make more of a difference. If you have military experience, it's much easier to get into politics. If you have, a position in politics, it's much easier to make a difference, from the top down. But if you get high enough up in the tech industry and you become like a really big business owner, well, then, you have sway from an economic perspective. From that standpoint, you look at all the stuff that Elon Musk is doing, there's a lot of different angles that you can come at this to try to make our country and our planet better. And I want to do all of them, but I just don't have enough time, and it sucks.
Yeah. There's so much to do and not enough time to do it in. Yep. Yeah. Now we're going to get into more of the religious parts of the questions that I have. And the first one.
You mean the last ones weren't religious?
They were, but they dealt more with your channel. So now we're getting into where it's just strictly religion arguments. And my first one is, what, in your opinion, is the best argument for God?
What kind of God? An interactive Christian God, or like a theistic amorphous?
The most common God you end up running into. So I guess more of the Christian God, or just pick a God, whichever one you want. Just what's the best argument for a God, any God that you've heard?
I know a lot of Christians will throw out like, morality as an argument for God, but I think that's bullshit, because the flip side of that is that you have immorality and that you have all kinds of suffering and pain and horribleness. And it's like, well, if God allowed for all of that, he must be a monster. And so it kind of is like the Christian God is nonsensical. As far as any kind of interactive deity, I would have to say the fine-tuning argument is probably the best argument for God, which is why it's vomited forth so frequently by religious apologists.
Yeah.
But I also did a video on that. I did a video on the fine-tuning argument, taking it down and showing how, whether you're looking at our planet or even just the laws of physics, that there's reason to think that, you don't need to have some type of presupposition of God. And furthermore, when you do presuppose a deity, you're begging the question of what created that God? Where did it come from? Like, if it's even more complex than the universe and it's been around eternally, why couldn't the universe be around eternally? If it came from somewhere, why couldn't it have come about naturally? Or why couldn't we have come about naturally without it? And it just, it leads to this infinite regress. So,
yeah. I when you said the fine tuning, I kind of groaned a little, because I'm a drafter by trade, and that's the argument from design and fine tuning. It's like, oh, that's so bad. If you understand design, it really is. The next question is obviously the flip side of it. What, in your opinion, is the worst argument for God? For any God, a God, pick one.
Can I also say the fine tuning and just destroy it?
yeah. I mean, go ahead. It's your opinion on that.
I won't. I'm gonna go instead with the what is it? And I'm gonna ask the chat to help me out here. But is it the ontological argument that says whatever begins to exist has a cause? The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause.
The Cosmolon argument.
It's basically
ontological. Yeah, I think that's it. The Kalam ontological argument. Yeah.
Because it's so it's basically word salad, but they're making a lot of statements without any kind of evidence. So they're saying, one, how do we know that whatever began to exist had a cause? You don't know that. You don't know that, you could say like, oh, okay, well, we're going to assume that something sparked it. Okay, well, even if I grant you that everything that began to exist did have a cause, well, why does the cause then have to be God? Okay, so why couldn't the cause be something purely natural, something purely physical, something that caused the cosmos to for all of the matter and antimatter to split somehow, and for us to get an abnormally large amount of matter that then coalesced into everything that we have today? Like, why does it have to be some great omniscient all powerful cause that I don't get that. I think the other worst argument is when someone will say, and I've heard this a lot, where you'll say, what's the evidence for God? And they'll be like, look at the trees.
Oh God, no, just oh, oh man,
I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to vaguely reference the fine tuning argument and be like, the trees are so finely tuned and everything is designed and it's amazing. Yeah. But I hate that.
Yeah, I cringe whenever I hear anybody go, whenever anyone goes, look at the trees or look at the sky or look at whatever, I'm like, oh, you have no idea how bad that is.
I'm not sure if there's usually, like, when we talk, there's a little bit of a delay before the chat hears it. So I don't know if Casey Atheist, he just said, look at the trees. I don't know if he wrote it before he
I don't know.
I would agree with him on that one. I wasn't plagiarizing him though, just so he knows.
No. Steve, oh God, Steven, you're bad. Can we look at the pine fence? Pine fence, or which is a straight up get open hard raw discussion. Remember that? I love it.
Oh my God.
Oh, that was
Oven is a whole nother animal.
Oh yeah,
he's a basket case.
Oh yeah. But my next question is, if you were to become religious, what religion do you think you would join?
Either secular Buddhism or some form of like one of the goofy religions like Pastafarianism or Jediism or the Church of the Latter-day Dude. Unless if I'm not able to choose one of those, it's tricky because like I respect Jainism for its value of like nonviolence, but I think like all of the reincarnation nonsense or all the mystical nonsense is complete bullshit. I'd have to go with secular Buddhism.
All right,
because I mean they're still atheists. They still don't believe in a god, but
Yeah, that's actually believe it or not, that's the most common one I usually hear, and actually I would say that would probably be me if I became. There's just several parts of Buddhism I just don't agree with, so I don't ever see me joining it. But their philosophy is really interesting. I'll say that. But since you did recently go to what was a Unitarian church?
Oh yeah, Unitarians would be up there in my list for sure. So Unitarians are interesting because they started off kind of as a branch of Christianity, I believe, but it was an extremely liberal version where basically they said, we don't have any creed or dogma. We don't have, any specific beliefs. We welcome people of non-belief. We welcome, atheists, agnostics, Muslims, Buddhists, Christians, you name it. Yeah. And so they were very inclusive, very non-judgmental, non-dogmatic, creedless. And I mean, that's all stuff I can get behind. As long as they're, basing it in science and, they're not just propagating woo and craziness. Some of their more traditional services still adhere to, faith or prayer or the notion of a deity. And I don't support that. I don't think faith is a virtue. I think that it's a vice.
Yeah,
I,
I think you might be jumping a little ahead on the questions.
oh,
No, you're fine. You're fine. Hey, I'm happy. I'm happy. I was just like, because it's another two-parter. What was your favorite part of the service that you went to, and then what
mhm.
was your least favorite part? So I think you might be jumping right into I think the least favorite part there. So
Well, my favorite was they had a secular service, and it
yeah,
was basically just inspirational, motivational stuff that they talked about, where they were saying, here's three stories of people who rose above hardship and conflict, and helped others and stuff, and used their experiences to make the world better. And that service, like, that was phenomenal. They did a really good job, good singing. They had food afterwards, friendly people, no mention of anything supernatural. I went to they had another service that was contemporary. I didn't go to the conservative one, which was before that. Probably that's a good thing for them because I was reviewing the church.
yeah,
But that one was a little bit more spiritual and, mystical. God, we're all connected with this spiritual harmony of, wishy-washy nonsense.
yeah,
I wasn't a big fan of that, but I do like the community aspect. I like the fellowship, and I think if we had more secular groups and secular organizations, I like that they have a secular service for atheists. I really like that, and I have no issues whatsoever in promoting that. If people want to go to a UU church, to the secular service and secular fellowships and stuff, or if they go to one that's like their cup of tea, go for it. I really don't have an issue with that. What I have a big problem with is more the fundamentalist religious fellowships, and not even so much the UU. The UU is so, like, it's so, they they don't push one ideology on anyone, and I don't really have a problem with them. Even their religious services, I didn't really have a problem with them meeting like that. What I take bigger issues with are, and the people that I want to target and go after, are the religious organizations that are hurting people, that are, saying that, you can't do stem cell research because that's a soul in a petri dish, and it puts modern medicine back, while there's people literally on their deathbed waiting for breakthroughs and cures to diseases that we could have learned by now, to genetic illnesses that we could have cured by now if we had been researching it, to people who say that, you can't use condoms in AIDS-ridden parts of Africa. And, like the Pope, when he came forth and said that, or when you have people that are protesting outside of abortion clinics, and who aren't looking at it scientifically, who aren't looking at, when is life viable, or, they're not trying to come to a legislative position based off of when in the pregnancy should termination be, okay. Instead, they're coming about it from a perspective of, even the morning after pill is an abomination because you're killing a soul and
yeah,
you're taking God's will into your own hands. You have people who are dying of, who want to be able to die with dignity, who want to be able to have, they're in excruciating pain. They have stage 4 bone cancer, and they just want to be able to pull the plug and to have some type of form of euthanasia. And you
yeah,
have religious hospitals that will refuse them that right, and states that will deny people that right, because they say that, you're taking God's will into your own hand and you shouldn't be able to. And
yeah,
so, I mean, I see things like this that are harmful. Priests raping kids and then they getting covered up by a church because you don't want people to doubt the faith. Not just in the Catholic Church, Jehovah's Witnesses, it's huge. There's Protestant denominations where it's happened, it's huge. It's massive all throughout the Muslim world. And it's this idea that this dogma and that this belief system is more sacred and more valuable than the individuals who adhere to it. And so those types of religious fellowships are the type that I really want to target with my channel and go after. Scientology is extremely damaging, extremely cult-like.
yeah,
Jehovah's Witnesses are too. And, if I can help some people out of that madness and help educate people in some, then I will. But as far as UUs, I don't really feel like the UUs are really a harm to society. So, but that's just me.
yeah. Yeah, that the euthanasia one, I remember for the longest time I was against it. Like the doctor says suicide stuff, I was against it only because I know I had a friend who did commit suicide. So I kind of relayed that pain. And then I had another friend who their dad had stage 4 colon cancer. He was in so much pain. at times. He finally called his family together, said, I won't see you in the morning. I'm telling you goodbye now because I won't be here. And he took all of his pain meds, downed it with some beer, and then basically went to sleep. And that was, and ever since then, I've been like, okay, no, now I see the actual effects and why it would be done. Because, like I said, I was going off my own emotion of, I know the pain that suicide causes. That's kind of where I was at. And after that, I'm like, no, that makes sense. But the next set of questions is, what do you feel, if any, is the greatest pro to religion?
There isn't anything exclusive to religion. So, for example, I would say religion, a lot of times people bring, religions bring people together around an ideology and they form cohesive, fellowships and stuff. But that is not religious. Community is not religious. Those communities are. But the notion of community and fellowship is, they don't have a monopoly on it. People get together around sports teams. They get together around political groups that, atheists and secular fellowships form and meet. You've got groups like Oasis and Sunday Assembly. There's a group in Colorado, Secular Hub. There's Jerry DeWitt has a church down south. I forget what state he's in. I think in Louisiana. You have these other groups that they're popping up and they're forming replacements. Here in Tulsa, we have the atheist community of Tulsa. We don't have a fellowship on Sunday or anything, but we get together and we hang out and we'll do potlucks and we feed the homeless and we've done massive clothing drives and stuff. And we're always looking for ways to help both our members and other people in the community. And I think that's just an inherently human thing. Wherever you have a group that gets together that has certain values, whether it's humanistic or whether it's religious, then you can have that. But I think churches, because they've been so dominant in the public sphere as meeting points and as focal points for community and activism and groups and meeting and stuff, then they really have mastered it. They've gotten really good at it, especially here in the South. Churches have gotten really good at meeting together and coming together and supporting each other. And I think that we can definitely take a card from their playbook and we can learn how to do it better ourselves. And I think we should do it better ourselves. There's no reason that we can't start groups in every single city and every single state. But that said, I think right now religions are beating us at that.
Okay. And you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier. She kind of touched on on these next two questions a little bit earlier, but what do you feel is the greatest con to religion?
I think that the greatest con is the promotion of faith over doubt, because as soon as you say that you have to blindly accept this because it's written down, because especially this is probably the worst example that I can think of with this is Islam, because Christianity does it to a lesser extent. Christianity says all scripture is inspired by God. It's God breathed, but it was dictated to man. Man wrote it down. It's not necessarily the literal word of God. Some of it is like the psalmist just, writing poetry. Some of it is like, historical, but then there's specific points where God talks to you. The Quran takes it a step further and says all scripture, all of the Quran is the literal word of God handed down perfect in its perfect unaltered state to the Prophet Muhammad, and that it is the direct dictates of Allah and that you have to take it literally. And so whenever you have something like that, that literally it stagnates progress. Not only stagnates, it solidifies, it cements progress, because now you're stuck with a moral code, you're stuck with a scientific dictates of how the world works that have not changed in over 1,000 or 2,000 years. And so that you can't make progress. You can't actually question anything in it. And so in order to make progress, in order for like the slave trade to be abolished, you had Christians on one hand arguing from the Bible for it, and Christians on the other hand arguing against it, because it was mandated in scripture. And so you had to find ways to like bend over backwards through the hoops to reinterpret what it means. And it's much, much harder to do in the Quran than it is in the Bible, but you have both books that are doing this. And that whenever you have a new idea, whether it's evolution or, abiogenesis or the Big Bang, the age of the universe, stem cell research, all of these things that should be a no-brainer. They should be something that we're just like, oh yeah, of course. Like, that's what the science says. Like, where's the evidence? I want to see it. I want to test it. I want to try to falsify it. I want to see if it's backed up by other evidence. Oh, hey, it withstands all scrutiny. Like, let's keep testing it. But like, for now, like, this is the best theory that we have. Like, this is the best idea because there's all this supporting evidence from all these other fields, rather than just saying, oh, there's all this evidence supporting it. Well, what does the Bible say about it? Or what does the Quran say about it? Or what does my holy book say about it? Does it conflict with science? Well, then throw out all the science. And that's a recipe for disaster, no matter how you look at it.
Yeah. And I'm in full agreement with you. The next question, and you kind of touched on this a little earlier when you had talked about rewinding all the way to the Big Bang, but do you think free will exists? Why or why not?
No.
Okay.
And, I kind of touched on that before, but, what part of your body is acting freely? The more that you learn about neuroscience, the more that you start realizing that, like, whenever we've done any kind of experiment in laboratories, we've been able to predict what someone is going to decide before they're conscious of it. And whenever you start to look at like the notion of like mind-body dualism, we did a whole episode on this. Our last episode on the Here and How podcast was on this idea of, is the mind separate from the brain, this Cartesian principle, this Cartesian idea. And when you start to break it down, every single aspect, whether it's your feelings and emotions, whether it's your consciousness, whether it's your senses, all of these things can be attributed to the brain, to the physical brain. And when you damage specific regions of the brain, you lose these abilities. So if you damage a particular, like let's say that you have a corpus callosomy and you sever the connections of the two hemispheres of your brain, then you can have the right brain aware of something and the left brain not be. So it's like you have two different things, that one you're conscious of and one you're not. So if you have like two different images that you can only see with one eye or the other, then you can have like a little iPad or a video display that says, pick up the Rubik's Cube with your right hand, and your right hand picks it up. And then your left hand is like, or basically you're trying to, after the fact, you go through this process of rationalization why you did it, but you weren't actually aware. You didn't actually see it. You weren't actually consciously aware of what you saw, but your right side was. And so you picked it up with your right side, but then you're talking, so it's like an aspect of consciousness that is lost, that is directly correlating to a specific part of the brain being severed, and I'm doing a horrible job at explaining that, but you can watch there's a video by CGP Grey. I think it's called like UR2 or something.
Yeah.
And he goes into that more. But there's also another great example of this is people with hemispatial neglect, where part of their brain's damaged and they lose the ability to even recognize an entire hemisphere of their brain. So it's kind of similar, but it's a little bit different. Yeah. And they'll eat one half of their plate of food. They'll put on makeup on one half of their face. And until they turn to look, or until they're, you draw attention to the fact that they've done this, they're completely unaware that they've even done it. And so you have like things like this. You get hit in the head, you lose consciousness. You fall asleep, you lose consciousness. You can measure it in brain waves. You can see like when they're hitting REM sleep, when they're dreaming, And so if all of this is like in your brain, all of it is physical, all of it is chemical, well, then it adheres to the laws of physics. If it adheres to the laws of physics and chemistry and whatnot, then it's like everything that's happening around you, you're more like a conscious observer rather than the puppeteer. You may think that you're pulling all of the strings. You may think, oh, I'm the puppeteer, I'm controlling my body. And to some extent, you have will, but it's not free will, because like you're the puppeteer, but the puppeteer himself has strings. And, those strings themselves, like, it's not God, it's not some type of entity, it's something, it's all of these outside factors that are affecting your behavior.
Yeah. Yeah. That
slightly, well, everything else is going to change. You don't really have a say in that,
Yeah. Yeah. That makes perfect sense. That's kind of how I view free will, is you kind of have free will, but not really, because all your actions are dictated by everything around you.
Yeah.
I mean, So that's kind of always been my take on it. The next question I have is um what do you think, or what you feel is the greatest hurdle religion has caused in history?
The greatest hurdle? God,
Yeah.
there's so many. I'm right now I'm reading through The Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker, and there's a lot of violent harm that was done in the name of religion or against heretics or blasphemers or someone. And it really is quite gruesome. The extent and the level of it is far exceeds, the catastrophes of like the two world wars, far exceeds, violent rates today. Not just religion. I mean, it was even worse in hunter gatherer societies. So it's like, as a whole, there's various levels, various tiers that we, when we adopt when we have a certain society wide shift, whether that's adopting some type of local government, having having culture and free trade and what's called a due commerce or peaceful commerce, like all these things kind of push us towards more peaceful societies. But so it's not exclusively religion, but I think that the fact that religions have condoned violence in many cases, condoned slavery and beating children and genocide and taking sex slaves and stuff. Those are ramifications that are still being borne out throughout various parts of the world. And it's, it'd be very easy for a book to just say, like, don't rape someone or don't own another human being. And that would be that. But I think because you have these holy books that, they're not just saying something that's wrong, but they're saying that this is the dictate of an almighty God and he wants you to do it or else you're going to burn in hell for all eternity. That really has held us back a lot more than we realize. And people will say, oh, but it was also religious people that it was, certain, there were religious scientists and there were religious people that fought against that. And there was, a religious influence, a positive influence. And it just,
you're kind of jumping to the next question on that.
okay.
It is a double. Like a lot of these are the two-parter questions of where they play off each other with the like the two-sided coin. And the next one is, what do you feel is the greatest accomplishment that religion has done in history, or has accomplished in history?
The single greatest?
Just what you think is the greatest.
So it really depends on the religion.
Okay.
Again, because if you get into something, like the Bible, for example, the shift away from the Old Testament to the new one, and some of the teachings of Jesus where he says, love your enemy and to forgive others and stuff, like, I think that there are aspects of that that are very positive, and I think that they had a lot of potential to change society, and I think that slowly they have been, but religion had over 1,000 years to get morality right, and they failed abysmally. And it wasn't until the Enlightenment and the dawn of, the Industrial Revolution and, commerce, again, like even things like free commerce, or peaceful commerce, you suddenly have cultures that realize that it's not a zero-sum game. It's not just pillage and loot, but we actually are all better off if we adhere to an Adam Smith style of economics where we're all trading with each other and we're engaging in the activity that we're best at and specialized in, and that we all do better when we do that. And, so you have all these ideas where suddenly, nation states are starting to cooperate together. You have certain things that are outside of religion or secularism that make society more peaceful. But I think that, there are aspects of religion that maybe early on in society brought people together. So early on, you would have hunter gatherers and barbarians just pillaging, plundering, and raping, and then they got together, and at least their circle expanded a little bit further from just like my family and my kin that are in this little tribe to our religion and our religious group. And so it expanded that circle just a little bit to where now it's more of a functioning society. It's slightly better off in that, the scale of atrocities were able to become bigger as well, but society was becoming more interconnected and closer together. That aspect of it, I think, it helped us maybe out of our hunter-gatherer slaughtering tribal stage. I think it helped probably more than it hurt at the time, because everything at the time was absolutely freaking violent.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think that you have to have religion to have that. It may have helped because everyone's like, oh shit, there's like a guy in the sky that's going to torch me if I don't listen. It may have expedited it. But I don't think, I think now we have enough societal structures in place that you see the most secular societies, the ones that are, mostly European, but you also have places like Japan and whatnot that aren't religious, that are doing just fine, that have the lowest violence rates, that, it's no longer needed. I think we've outgrown those diapers.
Yeah. And this is my last question I have. So, Chad, if you have any questions for Thomas here, feel free to ask him in the chat here, because this is the last one I have written down for him, and it's probably actually going to be the hardest one, I would say, or at least in my opinion, it would be the hardest to answer. So I'm just going to warn you that ahead of time. It's if everyone who is a theist right now just all of a sudden realized, woke up tomorrow morning and realized that no guards are real, what do you think would be the benefits of that? And also, what do you think would be the harm of that?
Well, I think instantly, right off the bat, the benefits of it would be that they would have to reevaluate their position. And I think you would have a lot of people who it would be, a positive thing. They would instantly think like, oh, hey, I need to, why did I believe in all this stuff? How did I fall for all that? How can I not make that same mistake in the future? And so I think you would have a large section of the global population that would kind of wake up and have a startling realization, but also like that would get them to think and to be more skeptical next time and to really start to look into science. But I think unless you equip people with an alternative, unless you substitute, like if I just take away, I'm not interested in just taking away people's God belief. That's not my goal with my channel. I'm not just here to make atheists. I want to replace it with something. I want to show them that there's a reason why we think all these gods are bullshit, and that you don't have to have a God to be good. You can be good without God. So I'm replacing this blind faith and doubt with scientific skepticism and critical thinking. And I'm replacing this religious dogma and this blind, I do this because God says it's right, therefore it's right, with a humanist principles and values. And so you couple that together, and then you have, it's like they'll say like, well, where does my meaning come from? And I think when you ask what would the harm be of all of a sudden of them losing their religion, I think that there would be a lot of people who wouldn't know what to do with it. It'd be like instantly getting unplugged from the matrix, and they would absolutely go insane. There would be a lot of people who would be depressed, who would be frustrated, because post-deconversion depression is a real thing. And that's why you have organizations like the Recovering from Religion that help people out of this as they're going through this stage. Because for many of us, we've been so heavily indoctrinated, not just with a belief in God, but we've been told that without God, you can't have meaning. Without God, your life doesn't have purpose. What's the point in even living? So I think we would see a spike in suicides because people wouldn't be ready for it. They wouldn't be able to cope. They wouldn't be able to handle it. And that's why we need to equip them with this alternative. We need to show them that just because your meaning isn't top down, just because it's not some dictator that's telling you, hey, your meaning comes from what I tell you to do, therefore, fucking worship me and beg on your knees. Well, how is that meaningful? No, I want to have a meaning in life where I'm like, I get to decide what gives my life meaning. It's very bottom up rather than top down. It's Dan Barker says, asking without God, where does my meaning come from, is like saying, well, without a slave master, whose slave will I be? I want to show others that mean is so much more freeing. It's so much more liberating and empowering. And suddenly you can go out there and like decide, oh man, I really love doing this, or I really want to help people in this way, or this is something that is a cause that I really care about, that I'm passionate about, or I'm so curious, I want to explore and do this and see where all we can get. Suddenly your life is imbued with this deep sense of meaning, of things that you can accomplish, and you realize that you only have a limited amount of time to do it in. The fact that life is short, it doesn't mean that your life is meaningless. It's like, well, I better cram as much into it as I can. I better make this life fucking amazing because I got one shot. This isn't the practice run. But until you show creationists this alternative, until you show them that all of this BS that they've been flooded in, that they've been taught their entire life, don't question, don't look outside the box, because without God you can't have meaning, you can't be moral, you'll all be slaughtering each other. I think there's a lot of people that buy into that. There's a lot of people that actually believe that. Whether or not they actually would, I mean, it depends on the person. If you've got a crazy raging psychopath and all that's keeping them in line is that they think that a God is watching them, then yeah, you're going to have a subset of the population that then goes out and starts committing all kinds of crimes. There's still law enforcement in place. There's still, just because a God doesn't see you doesn't mean that a street camera doesn't, or that the cops don't. You still have to answer for those actions. You're still throwing away your life you're probably going to end up in jail. You may, depending on what state you're in, you may end up at the electric chair. You might get lifetime imprisonment and stuff. You're still screwing yourself over, and you're hurting other people in the process, and you're making society worse. So there's reasons not to do that aren't from a God, as well as, how, I don't know how you'd be able to sleep with, at night, or how you'd be able to look in the mirror at yourself. But yeah, I think there'd be a subset of the population that very well might go off the deep end. And that's why I think it's extremely important to educate people, even if they're religious, on the fact that you don't need to have God to have meaning. You don't need to have, a deity to find a purpose in life and to have a better alternative.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why you actually. It took me, because as I was writing, I was kind of thinking of my own thoughts on some of these, and I'm still trying to come up with a good answer for that question that I just asked you. You came up with it really well, so good. That I thought was the hardest question of the group of questions that I had. But we did have one question from the chat from the Godless Iowan, and it's, what's your favorite flavor of Kool-Aid?
Oh, I don't drink the Kool-Aid. Never drink the Kool-Aid. I don't. Is it blue raspberry? Isn't that?
I think that's one of them. That's the blue one. Yeah, I think.
That was pretty good.
Oh.
Just make sure you don't get it from anyone with the last name Jones.
Yeah, I agree. Wait. So you mean that old guy on my street corner was selling me Kool-Aid, whose last name was Jones? I shouldn't have bought that Kool-Aid?
Is he from the People's Temple?
He was from the Person's Temple. Maybe they changed the name.
They had to rebrand.
Yeah, I guess.
The Flavor Aid now.
Yeah, but I am not really seeing too many other questions, so I think that might be it. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Thomas, for joining me on this stream and doing this interview. I guess I will end it with his tagline here. I'm going to steal it from him. If you don't like it, I don't care. I'm going to steal it anyway. But have a good day, and don't drink the Kool-Aid. Bye.